Yes, you read the title right. Next to Gojo vs Sukuna, this is probably the second most anticipated thing by the fanbase. We finally get the return of Heian era Sukuna, and the way it happens might be implying that Megumi is as good as gone, like just straight up dead, but I don't want to spoil anymore. Let's just get right into it. The chapter picks up right from where the previous chapter left off, where after the death of Gojo, Kashimo bursts onto the scene without wasting any time at all. Well, as he's doing so at the beginning of this chapter, on a massive block of ice floating in the air, it's none other than Ice Star Uraume. But it's not just Uraume bursting onto the scene, because Hakari Kinji steps up right in front of them, saying that he made some sort of promise so he can't let Uraume live. Hakari opens his domain and Uraume activates ice formation against him. So as Kashimo challenges Sukuna, it seems like Hakari is going to be the one to take on Uraume. So it might be a fun little side battle as this whole Kashimo versus Sukuna fight goes on. But first, the focus does go back to the Sukuna versus Kashimo fight, because even though Hakari's domain captured Uraume in it, the boulder of ice continues to fall. It suddenly evaporates and Kashimo notices that all that was to deliver something to Sukuna. The pages that the leaker provided are a little blurry, and also Shueisha's been cracking down on leaks content, so I won't be showing too much of the pages here. So subscribe for a full chapter review as soon as we get some very good detailed panels. But essentially what's happening is that Uraume summoned this massive like ice glacier in the air, and as Hakari opens his domain expansion to fight Uraume, the massive iceberg melts and it creates this like heavy rainfall, delivering this weapon to Sukuna. And it turns out that this weapon isn't just any weapon, it's actually a cursed weapon which Yorozu constructed in exchange for a binding vow of death, Cursed Tool Kamutoke. So here we go, we finally find out what the gift is that Yorozu gave Sukuna. It's actually this weapon here, and this weapon should make a lot of theorists happy out there, because in one of the only Heian era Sukuna images that we have, he's holding this exact weapon, and this is actually a real weapon that ties back to some Hindu lore. It's called the Vajra, and it's a weapon owned by Indra, a Hindu deity. And I'm not going to get into too many details on what this weapon is and kind of the lore behind all of it. I'll probably do that in my chapter review, but in the manga the weapon seems to follow the lore pretty closely, because Sukuna uses it to launch an electric attack on Kashimo and says good old times. So I'm assuming Yorozu recreated the weapon for him, and it was one of his weapons of choice back in the Heian era. Well, coincidentally, Kashimo's cursed energy has made him resistant to electricity. Kashimo then questions Sukuna, did you become the strongest or were you born as the strongest? And Sukuna says something very interesting in response. Sukuna replies that he doesn't know because he was an unwanted child. Kashimo asks, how did Sukuna interact with others without knowing weakness? Or how did he show affection / mercy? Because Kashimo says he couldn't do so. He saw all other humans as pieces of dirt. So here we get some insight into both Sukuna and Kashimo, because Sukuna points out that he was an unwanted child, which I'm crossing my fingers is hinting at some sort of Sukuna or Heian era flashback at some point here, particularly in this fight, because they both are from the past. So I mean, it would be a great time to show some flashbacks in the middle of this fight. I wouldn't be mad about that. Well, Kashimo asks Sukuna to teach him if strength is to be alone and find a place to properly show your powers. So this statement might sound a little bit confusing, but I think Kashimo is essentially asking him if having strength means to have solitude in order to properly show your strength, or is solitude kind of a curse that comes with being strong? Kind of tying back to the whole monologue that Gojo had in the previous chapter, where he felt detached from society because of how strong he was, and that's why he enjoyed his fight with Sukuna so much. So this whole idea of being the strongest causing this ultimate form of solitude keeps getting brought up in the manga here. So I do feel like once we get a Sukuna flashback or something, this might be a driving factor behind a lot of the things that Sukuna does, or why he is the way that he is. I don't know, I don't think it just keeps getting brought up for no reason. Well, Sukuna calls Kashimo an extrovert and says even Gojo was the same. Sukuna taps his head with the weapon and calls upon Kashimo to fight him. Kashimo tries to land a hit on Sukuna using his staff, but Sukuna blocks it with his weapon. And this is where we get one of the major surprises of the chapter. Kashimo moves back and activates his curse technique, Genju Kohasaku. It apparently translates to something like Phantom Beast Amber. After landing a punch on Sukuna's face, Kashimo loads a breath type attack and blasts it at Sukuna. So in activating his curse technique, this like flame ability or something engulfs Kashimo and creates this like Sub-Zero mask on his face that allows him to spit out blasts like a dragon or something. Looks pretty awesome actually. The narrator explains that Kashimo's curse technique remakes his body to be able to blast any kind of attack which Kashimo can make from his cursed energy. So that's really really interesting. It seems like Kashimo can literally turn his body into anything. Like, I don't know if it's any type of element specifically or just generally anything, but either way it seems super broken. But we're about to see in a second why exactly it's a one-time thing, because we got to remember that Kashimo's curse technique is a one-time use. Kashimo manages to land another punch, his curse technique enhances his agility, and the waves that he shoots out evaporates anything that it touches. But Kashimo surpasses the human body to make this happen, thus once his curse technique ends, Kashimo's body will break. So this kind of reminds me of like the 8 gates from Naruto or something. It allows someone to surpass human limits for a brief time, but at the cost of their own body, which I think is pretty badass, but let me know what you guys think in the comments below. The narrator then begins explaining that Sukuna had a method of reviving his original body only once without using reverse curse technique, but Sukuna had intentionally halted it. And right on the next page, OG Uraume Sukuna is back. The narrator says the transformation of reincarnation has been restarted. And here we go, like I said at the top, the moment that many people were waiting for. We finally have Sukuna's true four-armed form. So that's just incredible. But aside from that, it seems that as Kashimo throws an attack at Sukuna, causing this transformation, like you don't see Megumi's body anywhere. It just seems like Sukuna blew up and then he turned into his original form. So I don't know if he quickly exited Megumi's body or something, or Megumi's just like straight up dead, like his body's evaporated. But that's a question I really hope gets answered soon, because Megumi definitely has some potential to come back and be super strong with a 10 Shadows totality, including Maharaga or something. I really hope we haven't seen the last of Megumi, but that's not the important thing right now, I guess. We finally have Sukuna's full-on true form, and the best part is that we have no break next week, so we're gonna get the continuation of this fight. It is interesting to see though that Sukuna could have turned into his four-armed form this entire time, and he can do so without using reverse curse technique, but for some reason he was waiting to do so. Not exactly sure why, it doesn't explain here, but he was kind of forced to transform because, you know, he couldn't use his reverse curse technique anymore. And with the introduction of Hakari here as Kashimo is fighting Sukuna, it does make me wonder where Yuta's gonna come into play here. If he's gonna intercept Kenjaku at some point as all this is going on, or all this is gonna happen first and then that's gonna take place next. Like, where is everybody else? I'm very curious to know what their reactions are to Gojo's death and what their plan is going forward, because again, Hakari did say that he made a promise and wouldn't let Uraume survive. So that means he had to have had some kind of prior conversation just before stepping onto the scene, which I mean, we might be getting a flashback to in the next chapter or something. So yeah, next chapter we're going to be getting like 8 gates Kashimo versus 4-armed Sukuna. Is going to be amazing. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below though. Again, also make sure to subscribe because I will be covering the full chapter once we get some full pages, some more detailed pages. That is it for this one though. Have an absolutely wonderful night, afternoon, whatever, and I'll see you guys in the next video.